Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It is time to discuss episode 6 of the Netflix limited series Mr. McMahon. This one's called The Finish, which of course during this episode we'll be talking about the Chris Benoit murder-suicide. We'll be discussing, of course, the allegations from the Wall Street Journal against Mr. McMahon, all those allegations there, and also discussing, I think, Vince's legacy, I think, is a big question we'll probably answering towards the end of the video. So lots of things to dive into on this one. Obviously, it's going to be lots of controversies. We are reacting to allegations, speculations, claims, all the sorts, the stuff that's been mentioned in the Netflix documentary. So that's the source of where we are discussing. Nothing we are saying is factual. We are just giving our opinions, as simple as that. So let's dive straight into it then. No time like the present. Vince saying very early on in this episode that he's got two different brains, thinking two different things. And he said as well, there's a third one that he could tap into if he wants to. He says that it's hard to take everything in for that reason. He wants to be normal and to fit in. And he again gets asked the question because he says, like, accepts, like, you know, he wants to fit in, but he says he's different, so he should be different. So they said, like, well, you're answering the question for this then. So what's the other brain thinking? And Vince says something fun and something about having sex. Clearly his mind is somewhere else in parts, and just goes to show very twisted mindset of an individual.
Dude, without being a trained psychologist, this just leads me to believe that this guy has got split personality disorder.
Massively. And
the fact that he says that he has a third brain as well that's thinking just lewd and crude and quote-unquote fun stuff is just like, I mean, yeah, I mean, dude, this guy clearly has some trauma that he obviously never dealt with. Like, because anyone nowadays, you would tell them to seek professional help. The fact that he says this in an interview, and he's just kind of like, yeah, that's how I've lived my whole life, really. I don't really see a problem with it. That's just insane, man. You're gonna see me, honestly, I'm trying to hold my P's and Q's for this episode because I am going to flip out later on about two specific moments. But yeah, I'm trying to really not swear as much as I'm gonna in a little while.
To be fair, you're doing it well to keep it down narrowed to 2 in this one. This one is obviously a questionable one, to say the least. But we can start off in a good way, I guess. The battle of the billionaires. Donald Trump being involved with WWE obviously was the main attraction to that WrestleMania, according to Dave Meltzer. Of course, it was main evented by John Cena versus Shawn Michaels. But yeah, the battle of the billionaires. The idea, obviously, that one wrestler would represent Vince McMahon, one would represent Donald Trump, and obviously the loser would have the head shaved as well. So a lot of interest, a lot of intrigue on this one. A lot of people saying as well how Donald Trump was a natural as well when it came to being on the microphone. Was you know, saying that it helped him in the political world as well. Obviously someone with a wrestling, you know, good with the pro wrestling world on the mic, fitted so well into the political world as well.
So what you're essentially saying is Donald Trump as the president is a really good character. Like, that's how almost like they portray this, is like, yes, the fact that Donald Trump the president and Donald Trump the guy that was on WWE TV and on WrestleMania are the same people is almost the impression I kind of got from this. And I was like, that's a scary thought to process. But yeah, dude, I mean, don't get me wrong, this was a fun storyline at the time, and the fact that everyone knew Vince was going to lose and get his head shaved, and it was kind of like just Vince doing Vince things. And I think it was just the rub of having someone like Donald Trump on the at WrestleMania.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I sort of took it as well was almost as if, like, again, this explain of like the person and the characters, almost like Donald Trump, the character is president, rather than the real Donald Trump, which is it's interesting. It is interesting. Obviously, Linda has her involvement with Donald Trump, or certainly did in the past as well. So it's a fascinating insight into that. But of course, yeah, WWE would take credit of having a former president, I should say, and the current presidential candidate at the time of recording. But obviously, this then led to Vince McMahon, obviously, with a shaved head, some hair coming back. But they wanted to start a midlife crisis idea for Vince McMahon. And of course, Vince has to take it one step further. What if someone tries to kill me? rather than just actually having a midlife crisis. So they went with the exploding limo story, which of course was Vince coming out sort of a bit like stumbling on his words, people saying he's not right, taking a lot of dramatic pauses, obviously going backstage slowly, passing all the talent, then takes a big sort of breath before he gets into the limo that explodes. And to be fair, they say it themselves, it's very well edited because it's very quick as well. He gets in the limo and then immediately the thing just explodes, and it's kind of like there was genuine concern. And even Donald Trump called WWE to check Vince was okay. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought it was a storyline in 2007. I didn't buy it was real, but
yeah,
it seemed that some people did.
It's still wrestling to me, god damn it, according to some people, including Donald Trump. Like, dude, yeah. Just thought it was one of them elaborate storylines that they were doing. Didn't really think much into it. I think, like I said, I think the fact that the most noteworthy thing to come out of this is Paul London. I think it's Paul London is sacked for smiling at Vince as he walks along through backstage, and I'm like, sure, okay.
Is that true?
Yeah, apparently Paul, because he's part of a tag team at the time, isn't he? With I don't want to say Brian Kendrick. Yeah, Brian Kendrick, yeah. But if you watch Paul London, as Vince walked past him, he's smiling. And Paul London is adamant to the day that's the reason why he got sacked, was because he was smiling in that backstage segment. And I was like, that is just insane. And I find it so comical that was... Because like everyone else is all like sad and serious, and Paul London sitting there with a cheesy grin on his face, and obviously Vince has tweaked it as he's walked past and sacked him for it.
Generally can see it as well. That's so brilliant. I need to
go back and check.
I need to go and check it, but I can see. I've seen Paul London smile many a time
because he's on the right, isn't he? Yeah,
yeah, I've seen him many a time. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, magical stuff indeed. But yeah, obviously the storyline does obviously take a dramatic halt. We never know how it was going to play out, what the intention was or whatever, because they wanted to blur the lines of reality, something we've seen in previous episodes they've always been quite good at doing, but obviously had to end due to the Benoit murder suicide, real life. What happened 6 days later, obviously Benoit missing the pay-per-view, which I believe was Night of Champions, I believe was in 2007, which obviously, you know, they did the tribute show on Raw, which is actually, I believe, is not on the network. So I'm guessing it won't be on Netflix either, because obviously they didn't know what had happened at the time. So when the wrestler had died, they usually did a tribute show for them if they were active on the roster at that point. They did that for Chris Benoit, and obviously when this was the show was on, the real sort of details of this were coming out, which pretty much led to them having to completely backtrack, and obviously more detail than what obviously is given in this documentary. Obviously Benoit's name is arguably blackballed from wrestling history. He's not mentioned on TV anymore of any, and you know, it's the first time we've probably heard the name Chris Benoit out of anyone's mouth, WWE related, since 2007, which is sort of mad in itself. But pro wrestling was back under the microscope again, obviously being blamed for steroid abuse and stuff like that. But Vince McMahon was on an interview on TV and basically saying that Benoit had gone nuts, not knowing about the monster that Benoit was.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things about this. So just in general, talk about the tribute show. So what the impression I got was that when they were actually doing the live tribute show, that's when all the allegations came out as they're doing the show, as it's on TV.
Yeah. And
that's when they find out that it's meant to be a double homicide suicide. And it's kind of like it almost like they obviously, that since then they've obviously, whenever they do these tribute shows now, they tend to give them some time, or they always make sure that circumstances are okay for them, because obviously, like you said, this episode isn't on the network, and the fact that we see the empty arena post, like empty arena pre-ring announced by Vince when he's in there and he talks about it and stuff like that. Again, very nostalgic, because obviously I haven't seen it since the day. Obviously, no one's seen it since that day, since they aired it, and obviously it's one of the things that no one will ever see again. Like, unless you're one of them people that used to record episodes of Raw or whatever, and someone's probably got it on a VHS tape somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just one of the things that pretty much the world will never see again. But I remember the episode, like, because I'm sure the Godfather was having a match with someone, and the Godfather didn't want to wrestle. He was meant to be wrestling someone, and they went, nah, man, let's just go backstage. Let's go have some drinks and let's just go remember Chris. And they didn't even have the match. And it was almost like a character angle for Godfather, where he obviously used to come down with the ladies, and then he says, oh, let's just go party, man. And they just end up, they don't even end up having a match. I think someone like Road Dogg or someone like that. And do you know what I mean? Like, it brings back certain bits that I can remember from the show. But then obviously, yeah, to move on to everything that starts happening, and the fact that I don't know, the fact that Vince turns around and says that Benoit went nuts it's the mindset of the generation, because he is very much like people I know of that age, where they're like, they don't believe in certain things because of the way they were raised and brought up. So where obviously what we're about to talk about with concussions and stuff like that, there's a generation of people that don't believe in stuff like, they don't believe in concussions. They just think, oh, went crazy and did whatever. They don't like, there's a generation of people that thinks litigating circumstances aren't a thing. It's just something someone's done. And that really pissed me off, because I was like, obviously we know a lot more today than we did back then, but even at the time, to turn around and for Vince to say that openly is not the cleverest move you should be doing for your business. You should essentially just be shutting the hell up, because you've already run this tribute piece, and it's almost like he's trying to make up for the fact that he's run this tribute show by now slander his name, to almost save his own name, if you know what I mean.
It gave that impression a little bit. Obviously, you know, no one defends what's happened with everything here, and you can quite clearly see that. But obviously, it's to try and find explanation and reason of those actions. It's simply that, you know, there is more than meets the eye that no one will ever know, or is it a case that perhaps potentially what Chris Nowinski did the research for, with concussions and finding CTEs and stuff like that, which for those wondering, with CTE, it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I hope I've said that right. I've probably butchered that, but basically it's a brain disease by repetitive hits to the head. And obviously Chris Benoit was famous for a lot of hits to his head. Obviously he used the flying headbutt as his finishing move for many years of his career. He used to do it off the top of cages, used to all sorts of things with his head, like brutally, and obviously chair shots obviously would be quite, you know, modern, you know, weaponized and very common at that point as well. And we just see a lot of these bumps that Chris would take where he would land on his head, where a lot of wrestlers explain it to be a work, which obviously, okay, fair enough, the wrestlers know what they're doing, stuff like this, but he did look like he was landing quite on his head. That, you know, are we saying that 100% of the time that there can't be a slip? I mean, Austin himself, Stone Cold Steve Austin, said that, you know, if you're getting many concussions, then you're not doing this very well. He didn't believe in CTE. However, he got one concussion where he was dropped on his head, obviously broke his neck. Obviously it was at SummerSlam 1997 against Owen Hart. But like, that goes to show then that it does happen from time to time, even if it's a one-off, like how bad it can be.
Yeah, I mean, Austin turning around saying he doesn't believe in CTEs is like really shocking in itself, for the fact that, like you said, he breaks his neck at SummerSlam 97, but he had to change his whole wrestling style because of that injury as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's something like, oh, I got a bump on my head, like it's like, do you know what I mean, one of them old Looney Tune cartoons, and it's like, oh, do you know what I mean, ice pack, and it's fine 5 minutes later. And again, like I said, very surprised to hear someone like Austin say that. But yeah, Chris Nowinski, like, obviously being a former wrestler, suffered many concussions, which leads him to then go into working with doctors and trying to establish it. And then the scariest thing is Nowinski turned around and said, because obviously once he passed away, Benoit's father, I believe, gives Nowinski the permission to study his brain, and they basically turned around and says that Chris was a, in quote for quote, ticking time bomb because of the injuries that he'd suffered. Is like the fact that that is one thing as well, but then obviously you add on the fact that Eddie Guerrero had obviously passed away previously as well, and obviously Eddie being a massive friend to Chris, and again we would go back to the dark side of the ring, that we know that these two are like, Chris really suffered after Eddie's passing, and it's like you just pile all these things into one person, and it's kind of like the inevitable is going to happen by the looks of it. And it was like Nowinski says, like, without trying to sound horrible, but a ticking time bomb is almost like the perfect analogy. You were essentially just waiting for that point where something was going to go wrong. And then just to touch briefly on like I think Vince turns around and says it's a work, but as they're doing this, they're overlaying like back body drops and stuff that Benoit's taking, and he's clearly landing on his head, and then it's cutting in chair shots, and it's like, dude, how many times have we had a discussion in even recent years where, like, for instance, AEW have done chair shots to the head, and they're like, oh yeah, it was a gimmicked chair, and it's like, you can't gimmick a chair. You're just genuinely hitting someone on the head with a chair. It's so stupid, man. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, we go back to the time where, like, with 15, 16, 17, chair shots were cool, man. Going through tables was cool, and it's again, this is one of them turning points for the company where this is like, this tragedy has to happen for the business to change. And it's like, again, I'm not trying to say that that's a good thing, but like, unfortunately that has happened, and it's caused the business to change. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I like them saying the fact that Benoit is blacklisted from wrestling, and like, there isn't enough that you can do to even try and reprimand or like hide the fact that this happened. It's like, it's just unfortunate. It's happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's kind of like, maybe with time, more people will generally start to forget about it. But unfortunately, dude, that time is probably like hundreds of years in the future. Do you know what I mean? When WWE is probably non-existent anymore, it's probably been rebranded. Vince's family and the McMahon name is probably, I don't know, buried or like just killed off through marriage. Do you know what I mean? Where marriages happen and that people change their names, and like, it's just unfortunately a way that it's going to go, and it's just, it sucks, man. It's like even the interviews that they do with people, like, I've seen people like Chris Benoit talk about it, and they sit there and say, not Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho was like, they say that for how technically gifted he was so troubled. And it's like, I mean, I'm trying to not dig myself a bigger hole here, but you know what I'm trying to get at. Like, it's just, it's one of them things that's just had to happen. Well, that did happen, sorry, that's just changed the business forever, in a good way as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a horrible thing that you wish had never happened, and obviously you wish there were different ways and means that this stuff was found out soon. Obviously, you mentioned obviously Chris Nowinski obviously done all the research to to get this, and he had problems with obviously NFL, NHL as well. Like, they're trying to get this sort of like concussion thing to get through better, and Vince was someone that actually listened to Chris and said, if you can get like a decent honest feedback on this, we'll try and take it on board. And like you said, that's where, you know, some things were changed which are for the better. The chair shots to the head, which Undertaker wasn't on board with at first. Old school guy, you know, believed that that's what you meant to do, but obviously understands for the safety and the well-being of the performers, and obviously that's what it's all about, is the safety and well-being. And obviously you look at the schedules back in the old days, the schedules were like, they would work like 10 days in a row, then get 3 days off. Now it's 4 days, well, then it turned to 4 days in a row and 3 days off, and now apparently it's even better than that, because house show schedules are getting less and less, so they're wrestling a lot less, and actually that protects the bodies, it protects them in a much healthier state, you know. And obviously a lot of wrestlers, you know, moving on a little bit here, but hopefully not too prematurely, but like, a lot of wrestlers were dying before they were 40. And that was coming through like different abuses and stuff, or it was steroid abuse mixing with other drugs that would, you know, were recreational to trying to make them feel better through the pain they were going through wrestling all the time. You look at the likes of Kurt Hangman, Mr. Perfect, the British Bulldog, Test, with 3 names that were mentioned, Eddie Guerrero as well, all dying before they were 40. And, you know, these were all primed, you know, good athletes and having good matches, and, you know, they were taken too soon.
Yeah. I mean, like I've said in the previous episode, the fact that Owen Hart is one of the guys that I would, well, Owen's a Hart is a different thing, but like it's the same principle. Like there's guys there that you would like to have seen to have had, especially like Eddie, for instance. These are guys that you want to see have longer, more fulfilling careers, and like you'd be interested to see what they could offer the business today if they were still alive. And like, yeah, I mean, like even the fact that this happened, and how much it's just changed every sport in general. Because even like football today, there is now a concussion protocol in place, and like every sport in the world changed because of this moment. And as much as that's a good thing, it's like we've had to go through that bad thing to get this good thing. And like, yeah, I mean, just again going back to like they say, go back to the wrestlers that died before they were 40. I mean, like, it seems to be like, it's obviously, I think we've kind of got past that period where we're not seeing as many, if any, now die before the age of 40, which is a good thing, because again, I believe that obviously when this protocol comes in, they are all starting to treat themselves better, and they are starting to make sure that they get things checked out properly, and like obviously they have the wellness program in place, so like anyone that's suffering from any sort of substance abuses, and the fact that obviously from here on WWE would now pay for anyone that needs to go to rehab as well, which is again a very smart move in a business sense, because obviously 1, you're protecting yourself as a company, but also 2, you are protecting those individuals who work for you, because essentially they're your bread and butter.
Absolutely. And I think obviously when they did those sort of suspensions as well for wrestlers that were, you know, tested for drugs and stuff at the time as well, and you know, some would go be suspended for 30 days, then it'd be 60 days, and if it was a third time you were fired. So yeah, a lot of things changed around that period as well, and obviously they went as well.
There is actually, before we just go on as well, this is the point where I'm going to lose my absolute shit about the first one. So then they cut to Phil Mushnick, who's obviously the guy that's had it out for Vince for the last 30 years, and he said something that really pissed me off, because I was like, he turns around and says, he implies that wrestling fans didn't care that wrestlers were dying because they just have the next big star come along 5 minutes later. And that really honestly fucked me off, because I was like, I'm saddened by the loss of these wrestlers. Like, does he think we're all like brain dead and we obviously don't care about them as human beings? And then just honestly, I pretty much agreed with this guy for most of this documentary, but then when he gets to this one point, and it's almost like he's trying to blame the fans at this point as well for this, and I'm like, dude, we're just people that watch a show. We've got no control over what goes on backstage. We're not in control what goes on like in the ring. We're just the average view. Well, we're just the view in public. And for him to turn around and say that, oh yeah, they didn't care that wrestlers were dying, it's like, dude. In the previous episode, I explained I remember where I was and what I was doing the day Owen Hart died. Do you know what I mean? It's not like these things don't have an effect on people, and it really pissed me off, man.
Same, really. I mean, obviously, I remember where I was for Owen, and I'll open and say I remember where I was with Chris Benoit as well. I remember seeing on the ticker on Sky Sports News when I got home from school the next day, and I was shocked because you know, I'm not saying it, Benoit was one of my favorite wrestlers before what happened, and you know, in ring I thought he was a genius. I thought he was a great technical wrestler, always had some great matches. Some of the matches with Kurt Angle, for example, were 5-star. They were brilliant, but obviously the human being on the outside of it, regardless of what we, you know, think of what could have been the repercussions or what could have been the cause, you know, is irrelevant. It was disgusting and horrible, never be forgivable. And, you know, is the the fact that he's been blackballed from wrestling is the right thing, regardless of what the reasoning or of it is. You know, there's no excuse for what's happened, but like, we do care as wrestling fans. We do care when we see someone has passed away. There's always the tributes. There's always the round of applause. There's always the continued chant for certain wrestlers. We still chant Eddie to this day for Eddie Guerrero. We still chant for Macho Man. We still chant for all these different people who are no longer here.
There's people that go out there and permanently scar their skin, permanently just like scar their skin with tattoos. Like Bray Wyatt passed away. How many people went out and had that death moth tattooed on them as a tribute to that guy? And like I said, for him to say something like that, honestly, just like wound me up, because I was like, he just makes it out like we don't care, and it's like, we do care, man. So many people care. Well, do you know what I mean? I dude, the tribute they put out to Ultimate Warrior, right? Dude, I'm not afraid to admit I bawled my fucking eyes out, because that was the guy that got me into pro wrestling. And to sit there a week later, like, bear in mind, he'd just come back the week before. He'd been inducted into the Hall of Fame. He had that segment on Raw, and he dies the following fucking morning. And I'm like, you're not serious. That cannot be happening. And do you know what I mean? And like a week later, and that tribute they run, and that song by Seven Lions to this day gets me every single time. And for him to turn around and say that essentially we don't care just pissed me off.
I'm with you 100%. 100%. And that just brought back flashbacks to the Warrior as well. Obviously, like you said, it was so shocking at the time. Like, you just come back. Felt like, as well as the closing speech, the closing words, it was like, God, like,
how fitting of a closing speech can you do? It was almost like it was perfectly timed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's mental, absolutely mental. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I totally agree, and I think for a majority of the fan base, it's the same. I think for many, you hear thousands in arenas across the countries and across the world with the same way. So I personally disagree with Phil's statements as well. Moving on to another thing then that might upset you a little bit is the Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania. Obviously,
I'm not upset that he lost. Put it that way.
No, I'm not upset that he lost, although it was shocking at the time. And I thought it was the wrong decision at the time as well. But obviously, Undertaker was due to go over. I was 21-0 before going in against Brock. And Vince made a last-minute change on the day. And early into the match, Undertaker got a concussion. The match was 25 minutes long, didn't quite know where he was. The match isn't very good, if we're being brutally honest, and that's the very good reason why. And it continued on, and the streak was broken, and it was a very eerie feeling around the arena for the entirety of the match. What I don't approve of is when the Undertaker says he's had a concussion 5 minutes into the match, for then Vince to say, I didn't see the point where the concussion happened. Personally, I think he was just in shock with everything. The last minute shock that the streak was actually coming to an end. Nothing to do with the concussion. They're supposed to be really tight as well.
This guy couldn't have more of a fucking split personality if he tried. Like, I'm sorry, did you not get in an ambulance with him after the match and go to the hospital with him? Did you not leave WrestleMania for someone else to run because you were more concerned about the health of someone who had been with you for 30 plus years? And now, what year is 30? Just refresh my brain. What year is that? That's like
10 years ago.
So 10 years later, oh no, let me rephrase that. So this would have been 8 years later. He's interviewed and gone, I just think he was in shock that he lost. Are you fucking insane? You went to the fucking hospital with the guy. You cannot be serious.
It's mental. The thing is as well, because take a bullet for Vince. It feels like clearly it's not the other way around here.
Yeah, it's not reciprocated, prick. Sorry, man, but it angers me, because it's like the amount of times, like when, like, I don't know if you've seen the network special from The Undertaker after he retired, and they interview Vince about him, and Vince just talks about him like he's an illegitimate child, like he's just another son to him, like the son that he always wanted, kind of thing. And for him to turn around and just be like, nah, I don't think he was concussed, I just think he was in shock that he lost. what a fucking arsehole, excuse my French.
That's all right. Yeah, I agree. I would use the same swear words as you have, but you've already beat me to them, so I don't know. I don't need to do it. It's fine. But one thing from TV14, WWE changed to PG. Funnily enough, it's a nice little segue. Just basically down to sponsorship deals and to get more families involved, to change from that 18 to 34 bloodthirsty demographic. To be, I suppose, to broaden horizons. Which, let's be fair, I think a lot of people were not in favour of the time, and there have been moments, and I can understand why Ruthless Aggression era fans crapped all over the PG turn, myself included, because there's a nice balance. The thing is, pro wrestling today, I enjoy because there's a nice balance. When you're giving me a bunny as a wrestler or giving me the Muppet Show backstage, yes, you're insulting my intelligence. You're back to the mid-90s of utter crap.
Oh, dear.
Nowadays, you're not giving us that. You are giving us as a PG product that has... Look at that, it's the boundaries, because Attitude Era, the thing that people don't know about the Attitude Era, and I say this a lot of the time, people go, oh, it's TV14. Yeah, it was TV14. But actually, a number of the shows, despite that, were PG shows. Not everything hit TV14. You can get away with a lot more in PG than what you
just remember the shocking moments, which is why I think it's more fondly remembered.
Exactly. But even some of those shocking moments are still PG. You can get away with more than what you realise. Everyone just thinks just because of the fact it was a time period that all of it was TV14, all of it was swearing, all of it. We have PG now, and some of the storylines can be edgy, they can be fun. Yes, The Rock goes out and drops some F-bombs, and those are probably TV14, maybe even higher. I'm not going to quote and say that's a PG moment. It's certainly not. But everything else is still PG.
Yeah, it's... I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of the PG era. Like, you know, my favourite wrestler of all time is Jack Swagger when he's like the world heavyweight champion, you know what I mean? And like, poor Adam Rose, because I had so much hope for Adam Rose when he came up, and he gets wind up with a pissing story where he ends up wrestling a bunny and inevitably kills his career. And yep, the Muppets as a host, dude, as much as I love Beaker and Animal, yeah, it's so stupid. And it's like, since Triple H has taken over, the sponsored matches at pay-per-views are more bearable now. Because obviously we went through it, like, again, we went through the Mountain Dew Blackout match, like, aesthetically cool, but it's a sponsored match, and it's Bray Wyatt, your biggest returning star, like, in his last ever match at the time. Do you know what I mean? So stupid. And yeah, dude, yeah, just generally going on. They're starting to move a different way. I think there's even people like, for instance, as much as I hate to say it, but Bayley is a product of the PG era because her character was aimed at young girls, like 5 to 11, however the age it is. Do you know what I mean? A character was specifically created to appeal to that dynamic. And although she's no longer like that, to be fair, I think she's just grown up, and like the fans that were fans of her when they were a kid now are still fans of her, but they've obviously matured the same way that the character has for Bayley. But yeah, it's not a great time. There is a load of crap they put on telly. Again, this is a period where I checked out because I was like, I don't really have a lot of love for this era, because it's, again, like you said, a lot of people at the time were like, oh, where's my chair shots to the head every 5 minutes? Where's the blood? Where's the gore? Where's the controversy? And instead of having to deal with just this twaddle, and then like you get to things like I think Raw 1000 happens during this point as well, and you've got like you had a story in the Attitude Era of where Mae Young ends up fathering a child with Mark Henry, and in the PG era, that child has grown up, but what they don't tell you is that child is a giant hand. And we get this guy standing at the door in a hand costume going, "Hi, I'm Mae Young's son." Yeah.
They should have been, it should have been for WrestleMania 38. You know, John Knoxville gets Sami Zayn. That should have been Mae Young's hand, all grown up. That would have been much better.
That's a great shout, yeah.
Would have been cool, but yeah, obviously they mentioned the Bayley. They mentioned about women's wrestling being taken more seriously thanks to Stephanie. Not too much more on it though. They skated over it like a Divas match in the mid-noughties, which was a bit weird.
Yeah.
They could have spent more time on that. And the thing is as well, it's actually a positive story that when we've focused on so much of the negativity of women's wrestling, I'd like them to focus a bit more on a positive side. I guess positivity doesn't create ratings and doesn't create clicks.
I can tell you now that the reason they skipped over this is because this wasn't Vince McMahon's thing. This is a product of Stephanie McMahon. This is the reason why the women's evolution happened, was because Stephanie McMahon was part of the company at the time, which is why they skipped over it, because Vince probably had nothing good to say about it because it wasn't his idea. It was just something that Stephanie wanted to do, and it got over and made him money. That I can pretty much guarantee is the fact behind the women's evolution. Because the fact that even afterwards, women's wrestlers still suffered under Vince. It was only on NXT where we're watching Triple H produce women's matches where we're like, my God, these women's matches are great. We need to get them up. And like, you can even tell when the likes of Bayley, Sasha, Charlotte, Becky, and all of them come up to the main roster, they're still being put in like 3-4 minute matches. And I'm telling you now, the evolution as a product of Stephanie McMahon is why it succeeded, and that's why it skipped over.
Do you know, I don't disagree with that, and I have nothing as a comeback of anything. I think that's perfectly well worded, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I'm satisfied with that answer. Shane though returns. Obviously, I mentioned about Stephanie making some business moves. Shane returns in 2016. I remember when Shane, that was a big deal at the time, and Shane mentioned he got goosebumps, and it was cool at the time, because I think everyone kind of wanted Shane to be the prodigal son to come back and take over the company. And actually, we would get change through this PG era that we wasn't a big fan of at the time. But basically, he does everything to impress his dad. That's pretty much the gist of what we got of a lot of it, really. The storyline of him against The Undertaker at Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 32, some of the crazy stunts we've seen, pretty much all done because of the fact that he wanted to make his dad proud, and his dad did say he was proud of him and did give him a hug after WrestleMania 32.
There was a story beat that they ignored, and the fact that Shane wanted something that was in a safety deposit box or something, and we never did find out what it was. I'm pretty sure at the time it was a photo of them two hugging, because that thing didn't kind of exist between the two of them, and I think Vince had it locked away in a safe somewhere. But yeah, Shane coming back, dude, I popped hard the night he returned. I remember it very fondly, and he got the reaction that, do you know what I mean? A lot of wrestlers tend to worry about is he going to be remembered? And like, they brought him back like you said, like the prodigal son returns. And yeah, like seeing Vince proud of Shane after you're just giving him a hug and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it was, again, this is where like they try to humanize Vince, and it's like, dude, this guy's already gone from having a split personality. You can't be trying to humanize him again. Like, we already know he's that.
Yeah, it's too late at this point. And then you go on how he's a father figure for everybody as well. Obviously, Undertaker, Trish Stratus, John Cena all say that he's seen as a father figure. Everyone wants Vince's approval, including his kids. Obviously, Shane wanted to be the next Vince, but it never happened. Dave Meltzer said that maybe he just wasn't as good as Stephanie was. Stephanie was like her dad. Shane is just nice.
Yeah, and it's almost like Shane tried too hard, whereas Stephanie just bided her time and just, do you know what I mean, played the long game. Do you know what I mean? She married the wrestler. That wrestler happens to become COO. He works his way up, and he ends up like obviously running NXT, and then he gets to a point where like he starts having some sort of influence on the business itself, and Stephanie's just like, yep, that's my husband, like just playing the waiting game. But then, to be fair, we did get Shane in some god awful storylines when he did come back, and it's kind of like, I think that also tarnished Shane with Vince as well, because we had the likes of like Raw Underground and all that kind of crap that just didn't get over, and I think a lot of that is Shane's ideas, which I think also didn't help him.
No, as well, it was the SmackDown when he did get a show was the land of opportunity. Yeah, he booked himself in all the spots in the matches. Like, I'm on Survivor Series team, forget my roster. You know, this is the place you all fight to get something, and then I'm going to take it anyway. So it's just like, didn't really kind of work out so well for Shane, and including the
World Cup as well. The was it the WWE World Cup that only had wrestlers from the United States in it, and then Shane wins it.
Good times. Good times.
Greatest wrestler in the world.
Yes. Plans of succession, Stephanie and Shane, were expected. Shawn Michaels said that he thinks Triple H was going to be the guy, but don't quote him on that. That's higher level type stuff.
That's the click for you, brother.
That is a click indeed. That is totally the click. And will Vince ever take a step back or think about retiring? And Vince said, well, why stop growing? What do you do when you stop? Do you die? What do you do when you retire? I've got no sympathy for people like that. Go off and die.
Again, very weird, man. Like, at some point, you have to appreciate the fruits of your labor. And it's like, dude, that's essentially what retirement is. Like, you spend 90% of your life working, and then your retirement is for you to enjoy. Do you know what I mean? It's for you to go. Like, and obviously I know this guy's a billionaire and he can do whatever he wants anyway, but it's like you're meant to relax. You're supposed to slow it down and enjoy your finer years. You know what I mean? He's like, the fact that he's on about, no, I'm just going to carry, like I said, that, and I think we all got to a point there, like in the late 2010s, where we're like, I don't think Vince is ever going to give up the monocle like of running WWE. He is going to be there until he's in the ground.
And do you know what? Wrestlers agreed with you as well. John Cena and Hulk Hogan both said no. Booker said it would take a nuclear bomb exploding for Vince to stop.
Yeah.
You couldn't argue that one came in June 2022. So that's the moment when the Wall Street Journal released that Vince had paid secret $3 million hush money. Board received an anonymous email about it. There was a relationship, apparently, allegedly, where Vince had hired an employee, was paying them $100,000, but then gave $200,000 a year whilst in the relationship. Expected to be consensual, but all the control was with Vince. Vince, though, said he would cooperate with the investigation. He resigned as CEO, but carried on with creative. And apparently from this moment onwards, he had cancelled all of his final interviews with Netflix for this series. Shall I carry on with allegations to do it all in one rather than break it down?
Yeah, because there is one thing you're going to have to remind me of, because I haven't made a note of it. There's a Mickey James story that you're just about to talk about. And I don't remember this story, but I can't remember what the story was now because I haven't written it down.
Well, so basically it was a tanning salon that Vince had been there. There was accusations of him showing naked pictures, apparently, and groping.
I think I was thinking of him being naked in general in the tanning salon. I think was the thing. I think was the thing as well. And there was a story on TV of Mickey James making stuff up backstage, screaming "Stop touching me" to a guy that was around as well. But that's the one I'm on about. I don't remember that at all, and I think that's probably a good thing as well.
Yeah, I was thinking, what's this? Like, is this before Mickey James was Mickey James, or like, a bit of me was a bit like, I know Mickey had a bit of a strange character when she started with the obsession with Trish Stratus. Yeah, she was a stalker, but I don't know if this was linked in with that. I mean, you'd have to go and search it out, but very, very strange indeed. Very strange. More allegations would come out then. 4 women, $12 million hush money over a 16-year period, allegedly, according to the Wall Street Journal. Suppressed allegations of sexual misconduct. Allegedly, one wrestler was a $7.5 million lawsuit. It was involving oral sex, refusing further advances, and then a decline of renewing of contracts. This is the point then when Vince would retire. But of course, before that, he would actually appear on SmackDown, of course, on the day that the initial allegations would come out. And of course, when he did retire as well, that's when Stephanie would come out on that SmackDown that night, because it was done on the Friday afternoon, as close to SmackDown as possible to try and pop that rating. It seemed, obviously, always entertainment to the end, where Stephanie would also try and get a chant for Vince McMahon, thank you Vince chants at the time, which when you look and read all this sort of stuff that allegedly has come out here through the Wall Street Journal, that's not going to get me singing along thank you Vince on that.
I mean, by 2022, we've all kind of twigged on to how Vince runs the product now. And like, I think for most people that were clued up, they knew that by him announcing he was going to be on the show, that was going to be a ratings draw. And everyone who's kind of like, do you know what I mean? For us that are, do you know what I mean, internet wrestling fans, we know that this kind of stuff is there to push numbers, to try and draw a crowd. Because he literally comes out on the SmackDown and goes, "Oh, welcome to SmackDown," and then leaves. That's it. And it's kind of like he's probably drawn like 3 million people at this point, which is a record number for SmackDown at the time. And just for him to say that, because he knows what he's doing in terms of a business, that business sense. But yeah, the fact that it's a former wrestler that he gets paid, like I said, the $7.5 million as well, is like, you sit there and you kind of, your brain trying to sit there and tries to wonder, well, I wonder who it could have been and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I got to the point where I'm like, no, I need to stop thinking like that, really, because it's the fact that this has happened is like, it's bad enough that it's happened. And the fact that, I'm sure if you look hard enough, someone on Twitter probably has got like a list of compiled names, but it's like, nah, the biggest shocking factor is that Vince is pretty much, and by this point, power's probably gone to his head. And yeah, I mean, the funniest thing as well is that obviously he steps down, and they cut back to, because some of the interviews are like 2022, some of them are like 2024, but they cut back to a Hogan one from 2022, and he turns around and says, the business won't survive without him. I'm sorry, what? Does he not realize that there are other wrestling businesses outside of WWE that have been surviving for all these years? You know what I mean? They've just gone through a global pandemic and came out the other side and are still surviving. Hogan's just a bit delusional. It just seems to be he's trying to blow smoke up Vince's ass with that comment.
And there is a small reference of AEW on this Netflix documentary, which is a surprise, mentioning the competition.
Yeah, again, very surprising but then again, it's surprising but not surprising, because this is a Netflix produced documentary. I think obviously if this was a WWE, and the fact that they have AEW footage as well, that again is a big thing, because I think they're talking about Cody coming over, or no, the clips show Cody, and the fact that you got to pay for them, you got to pay for those images, man. So do you know what I mean? They've had to pay AEW to put some of those images of Cody on this documentary as well. I think is like I said, it's good to see. Let's say you can tell who's made it, though. You can tell it's a Netflix production.
Absolutely, indeed. There, and obviously, to go back onto Vince, obviously, and we won't be going into all the details, I think is the best way to put this, because there is some details that are shared through this. Graphic. If you want to see them, you go and see the documentary. We're not going to break every single detail down, but obviously Vince does return in 2023, and that's when Stephanie resigns. Allegedly, there was a backstage boardroom vote against him returning, but Vince obviously had the key votes to get himself back in, change board members as well, to get himself back in. Felt like that Stephanie, wanted nothing to do with the company with Vince back in. Someone close to him suggested that he should resign the first time, but he didn't really want to. Suggestions to come back for him to come and make a sale. Bruce said he had no idea why Stephanie left, and he said that suggestions of Shoemaker and Meltzer with that stuff that had been said previously just by myself, because those were the two that quoted stuff like this. Basically, they were making stuff up, is the words of Bruce Pritchard. We see Endeavor, obviously, by WWE, and the same with UFC, making the supergroup TKO group. Bruce Pritchard, now we're seeing 2024 quotes. Obviously, Vince hasn't come back, but Bruce Pritchard has here. They asked him what he thought of the episode so far. Obviously, he's clearly seen an early take of this documentary. Basically, he said that he thought this sucked. Basically saying that Netflix didn't get Vince's human side, which I suppose is hard to really do when you have just everything that was just said 5 minutes earlier, and stuff which is to come out after this, by the way.
Like 2 days later. That's what I mean. It's 2 days. Dude, Bruce Pritchard has a very strong loyalty to Vince McMahon, and it's a case of like, you can obviously tell this is where Vince, because obviously I think the deal is that they sent it to Bruce, and Bruce has obviously sent it to Vince, which is why he released that statement. So he's obviously seen whatever Bruce has seen, and then obviously Bruce turns around and says this is a gotcha piece. And it's like, at the end of the day, they've interviewed 30 plus people, and this is what people have said in reference to what they've been talking about in subjects. And it's kind of like, is it really a gotcha piece if it's like 30 different people saying the same goddamn thing? And obviously, like, so Bruce has a lot of loyalties to him, because obviously I think Bruce goes on to explain that because of Vince, his wife was able to survive another 24 years. Well, she was at the time I think of recording, she was 24 years going in surviving I think cancer that his wife had developed, and Vince essentially paid for the best treatment he can get. Now, while I think that is great, he essentially is buying your loyalty with that. And it's like, you can't take Pritchard's comments then for factual, because he's, like I said, he's probably on this documentary to protect Vince in whatever accusations or questions he's going to be asked. So everything Pritchard says has to be taken with a pinch of salt, really, because he has that love for him, where, like, dude, this guy, obviously, don't get me wrong, I think anyone would be in the same point. Like, if your wife is diagnosed with cancer and someone pays for your wife to be cured and she goes on to live another quarter of a century, I'd have the same love and respect for a guy like I'd want to protect that man with all my life as well. So Bruce's comments, unfortunately, have to be taken with a real pinch of salt in this.
Understandably as well. The thing is, it's great that happened. I'm really happy that obviously she survived.
Great.
Obviously, not saying every act is a bad act, but obviously, I think what we're going to come to in a minute as well is that with the allegations that have come out, obviously, no matter how good you do, those allegations are going to tarnish the name. And obviously, like I said, 2 days later, another Wall Street Journal comes out involving sex trafficking and abuse of a former employee. Obviously, this is the Janelle Grant lawsuit. Of course, the apparently allegedly forcing to have sex with him and co-workers as well for her job security, and it was not a consensual affair, allegedly. Apparently there was graphic as well text messages that were released. Obviously, we're not going to be sharing that content. Also, photos were shared without consent, including to a talent they wanted to re-signing in 2021. The talent allegedly liked what he saw. That name seems to be hinted, and the name was dropped, Brock Lesnar, on screen. So it's the first time his name's been officially dropped. Everyone's always put two and two together with it, obviously, but and it allegedly says here that sexual activity would be in the contract, which, again, that's the allegations to that. We've not seen that or not, but doesn't see, it sounds vile if that is the case. Vince's response to all of this, obviously you have to give his response. The lawsuit is replete. It's full of lies, obscene made-up instances that never occurred, and a vindictive distortion of the truth. He will vigorously defend himself. Now, obviously, if you were innocent, that's exactly what you would do. Obviously, the Wall Street Journal felt strong enough to come out and give these allegations. So, all I will say on it, because I say I think it goes without saying, it's not a good look, and it is completely damaging to where it's completely changed my perception and my opinion of what I was a big fan of, someone who had made the biggest wrestling promotion in the world. Arguably, you would turn around and say a genius in creation at times, madness in others. But my question to you would be, what is Vince's legacy?
I mean, I think because obviously, I can't really sum it up more than what everyone else is put on this. Like, if you watch the end of this documentary, everyone else is kind of just, I don't know. Like, because this completely tarnishes everything he's ever done, because he's not, like, Tony Atlas tries to say that he will go down as the greatest promoter of all time, and you're like, but that's overshadowed now because of all of this stuff, and he's no longer going to be remembered as Vince the wrestling promoter. It's going to be Vince the creep that, do you know what I mean, had twisted sexual desires for women. And it was kind of like, and to sit there and ask someone like me, like, oh, what do you think his legacy is? Like, it's not positive.
No.
it's not positive at all. And it's like I don't know. Yeah, I think you have you can't even, because I was going to say you'd almost have to try and justify them as two separate people. You would have to try and justify them as one, Mr. McMahon, the character, and Vince McMahon, the business owner. Now, Mr. McMahon, the character, by God, probably one of the biggest heels ever in the business of pro wrestling ever. But the Vince McMahon, the business owner, he is a work of. He's just a piece of work. Like, I don't think there's anyone out there that like. There's people out there that have done a hell of a lot worse. But when you're as publicly known and you're in the public eye as much as you are, like, do you know what I mean? You can't then separate the character from the human being. It's impossible to do. It's like there's no way to judge what his legacy is.
Absolutely. And obviously he goes on to make a final sentence of that himself, but just before we do, just read the other final bits of notes. Obviously he would after TKO obviously would read all those latest allegations from the Wall Street Journal. Obviously they were taking those allegations seriously. Vince resigned 24 hours later as well. But of course as well, like the other rumors and allegations that would come out after this as well. The 2016 claims from Ashley Mazzaro, claims of apparently she'd been raped in Kuwait as a man posing to be a military doctor. Accusations apparently, allegedly, were not taken seriously. Apparently Vince had known about it and covered it up, which of course WWE had denied this. Ashley then would later commit suicide in 2019, which would be which is already 5 years ago. But to you know, which is awful. I'm you know, Ashley Mazzaro is a name that comes up frequently amongst the fan base with when that stuff had come out. It's good that it got a mention in this documentary. I was unsure if it would or wouldn't, so it's good that it got a mention there, because obviously it just goes to show that what she said is being listened to now, even though it's probably too late. You know.
It's very important. It's actually more important than anything that she was mentioned, because, like, obviously they talked about the wrestlers that passed away before 40 for a plethora of things, but the fact that he's now essentially on trial for all these heinous crimes that he's committed, it would almost be criminal for them not to mention Ashley Mazzaro, because she will forever be a part of this story. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, not as in WWE story, but as in this whole story of this case and this trial, and like she will have ties for it forever. So again, try not to be like one-sided, but like the impression you get is that her suicide is because of this stuff, and like that's the reason why she took her life. Obviously we don't know for definite if that's the reason why, but obviously obviously everything that's gone on, everything that Vince has been accused of now, everything that she suffered in Kuwait, do you know what I mean? It like the fact that she is remembered and she is like a pivotal factor in this, that she's had to suffer the most for, do you know what I mean, to hopefully protect more women in the future. Do you know, again, I'm trying to put a positive spin on something really negative. Like, no one else will hopefully suffer anything like this in the future ever again. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, again, at the time of recording, Vince obviously hasn't been to trial, so we don't know what it's going to be, and it's kind of like, this guy's a billionaire. Do you know what I mean? Giving him a fine is stupid. It's like, why fine a rich man when they can just pay it? Like, you would hope to think that if he is found guilty, that he does pay for his crimes. Like, I would hate to like, dude, there's so many times that we see people commit crimes and get off with, like, we've seen people be prosecuted for like less offensive stuff and get longer time than people that have committed like major crimes. And it's just insane the way the justice system works. But like I said, hopefully there is some justice for Ashley and something positive comes out of it for her. Like, she didn't suffer in vain, essentially.
Let's hope not. Last closing sentence from Vince. Vince has said that there can be a blur to the character, to the real person. He says he's not sure which is which with him. One is exaggerated, but he's not sure which one. So I suppose that leaves us with the question of which one was the more exaggerated, the Mr. McMahon that we saw on screen with everything Netflix has put through with this documentary that we've seen with this limited series, or is the exaggerated one the man behind the camera that we don't actually see? We'll leave it to your suggestions.
Is he the bigger villain?
If you enjoyed this series, let us know what your thoughts, likes, everything in the comments below. And before we do go, NXT Steve, just a quick roundup of all 6 episodes. Ways.
Don't get me wrong, this wasn't like, I've seen many people say this, and it hits the nail on the head. This wasn't made for me, the wrestling fan. This was made for me, the Netflix fan that goes through stuff and documentary, because there's not a lot in here we don't already know about. Like, if you take it in a context of like the 6 hours worth of TV that we've watched, there's only a few things that we've walked away with that we didn't really know before, but we knew most of it. But it is highly informative, and it's something that I think people should go and watch in general, because this guy's had a pivotal role in most male upbringings for the last 40 years. And do you know what I mean? There is, like, for what he's now being accused of and what he will go to trial for, I think it's important that people build their own thoughts and opinions on him before anything else, because we have our opinions, because we've known Vince McMahon as Vince McMahon for the last 40 years, but there are people that are going to watch this that have never known the character, so it gives some fresh eyes to sort of experience who this man is and what he's like over his lifetime. But otherwise, it is a highly entertaining watch. I've enjoyed watching all 6 episodes, for good reasons and for bad reasons. Like, there's stuff to take away from every single episode, but yeah, like I said, it's highly entertaining, and I would recommend anyone to go and watch it.
Yeah, I would recommend everyone to go and watch it as well. I think you've hit the nail on the head with a lot of the points there, so I'm not going to sort of like repeat what you've just said with everything, but I do think that there's a lot of takeaways to take from it, some good, some bad, but it's very well put together, and obviously, yeah, we knew a lot of this stuff before, but for those that haven't, they get to make their own judgments and everything to go and see it.
It's a very unbiased opinion, like, because it's Netflix that are producing it and it's not WWE. It's, do you know what I mean? You can believe, there is a lot more believability to a lot of it, because it's not, they're not trying to protect Vince. They might be, I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? It's more believable than what WWE would put out if they were to make a Vince McMahon documentary.
Yeah, I can understand that as well. And my last question for you before we wrap things up is, are you surprised that Netflix has released this documentary, knowing that they're going to have all WWE content on their platforms across the world starting in 2025?
Dude, they think they've taken a note out of Vince's book here and realised that as a business model, this will draw eyes, this will get people viewing, and with Netflix, it's obviously that viewership. It's the reason why a TV series gets cancelled or renewed, like with Netflix. If the viewing numbers are there, it gets a second series. This is maybe Netflix dipping their toes in the water to where, right, we've done this piece on him, maybe we can go and do other pieces on other people in the future. But the fact that they've got it out before WWE is even on Netflix is probably the most sensiblest thing, because when that show goes, when Raw goes over there in the new year, they're going to want all eyes on that. They're going to want big viewing numbers. They're not going to want to slander a future business investment. So I think what they tried to do here is separate Vince McMahon, the person, from WWE, to make it seem like we've bought a business to broadcast on our channel, not a person.
I think it's very well worded, that, and obviously as well, Vince McMahon is obviously no longer with WWE now at this time as well, so it's kind of almost separating the two to this point. It's like this is what it was, and now this is what you've got. This is what it will be, the WWE of 2024 without Vince McMahon. Now 2025, and it's with us. Here you go, and yeah, get ready for the big end to come popping up your screen. But yeah, that's been us doing this whole series. If you've missed anything, then you can go back and see our thoughts on some of the other episodes. And yeah, it's been great to discuss all this with you, NXT. It's been, like you say, it's been a very good documentary overall to cover.
Very enjoyable. Like I said, it's even more fun to actually talk to someone about it rather than like, dude, I can't talk to anyone else about it. My wife don't watch this stuff with me, so yeah, it's always fun to do this with you, man.
Certainly fun indeed. But it's now your fun in the comments below to let us know your thoughts of the series as well. Let us know some of your takeaways as well. And yeah, we look forward to catching you for more videos and more content. Obviously, I'm pretty sure Netflix is going to love wrestling fans, because there are many of the wrestling community that watched all of this documentary in the first day of its release. So I think they already can see the benefits of having wrestling fans on their platform. But hey, hopefully you all can't get enough on this platform and you'll check out other videos. Thank you all for watching. Look after yourselves and each other. Check out this playlist on the side of the screen right now. We'll see you next time.